all muscles. And so I see a lot of people when they're doing these, when they're doing muscles, they'll get really in a strong position and they're doing it like this. And that's not doing anything to your rotator cuff. So the idea when you're doing all the rotator cuff strengthening muscles, the first is, I hear a lot of people talk about big bands. Big bands are the worst thing that you can get. But what you want to do is get the lightest band that you can find and just get an appropriate amount of tension on it. And then when you do the exercises, the whole key and idea, you can't see it from the front side, but you want to hold your shoulder blade as tight against your chest wall in the back as you can, because that means you have to, in order to get that position, you have to stabilize your rotator cuff. And then once you stabilize your shoulder blade against your chest wall, then you do the movement. And so the movement's, you know, it's actually a relatively small movement. And again, the idea is that you're isolating the cuff muscle and trying not to overpower it with your pec and your lat and your deltoid. And so that's what you're trying to isolate here, trying to keep the your shoulder blade against the posterior chest wall. So that's sort of the idea. And then what you do, you just grab the other side, same thing. I'm trying to keep my shoulder blade, I'm standing up and tall, good posture. My shoulder blade's back against my chest wall, and then it's external on this side. Okay? And the other thing, so when you're pulling down, ideally you like them to be up a little higher. So you just, again, keep your good posture. Try to keep your shoulder blades flat against your chest wall, and you're just trying to pull down and isolate the other, your lats and stuff. It's not really intended to do anything other than that. And trying to get the supraspinatus out here in an unimpinged position. And the way you're going to do that is not by coming way up here, because that's impinging, but coming down here, locking your shoulder blades against your posterior chest wall, and then just sweeping them down. And that way you're isolating your cuff again. And the final one is Dr. J's special. I haven't seen anybody else do this one before, but the only way that you can isolate your subscap, which is, a lot of people feel like that's the key to the rotator cuff. And after I had my shoulder surgeries, I was trying to figure out a way to strengthen your subscapularis. And if you think about it, your subscapularis is the muscle that lies on the inside between your chest wall and your shoulder blade. And the reason that's so important, because as your shoulder blade lifts off your chest wall, that naturally impinges your rotator cuff. So what you're trying to do is to do your best to hold it back. And the subscapularis is what does that particular activity. So the only way that I know that you can isolate that muscle is act like you're taking your hands, put them in your back pocket, and again, holding your chest, your shoulder blades against your chest wall, and do one at a time, and just do what we call lift off. And this really isolates your subscapularis, and best I know is probably one of the best exercises to do. So anyway, that's the key. The four again are just basically get up here. Again, the idea is not to get too impinged up in that position. Kind of lock your shoulder blades against your back of your chest wall. Those. Turn to one side. Check your shoulder blades again. External rotation. Internal rotation. Flip around. Same thing. Internal. External rotation, and then finally just do the lift off ones. You know, get your shoulder blades flat against your chest wall, and just lift off.
So is that, Jeff, is that really just for folks that are having issues with that, or is that an everybody kind of an exercise?
You know, I think, I mean, you can really gain a lot of, cuff strengthening from that. And, I can tell you sometimes the swimming activity, even through recovery and stuff, like today, I was starting to really feel some anterior shoulder pain and impinging and stuff, and so I'll just get out. I don't impinge on any of those exercises, and I don't know if it's certainly not as good a replacement as swimming, but I think at least you're working something. So today I'll do kicking and cuff stuff.
Something good to add to strength.
Yeah, fantasy.
Okay.
Self-tanning cream.
The traditional, when they do zipper drill, okay? I hate zipper drill because you're going to come through with your shoulder's going to be all jammed up, and then you're going to come through with the thing down. You're going to end up putting your hand in short around your ear, pushing against the water all the way forward. Let's get rid of that, and let's just swing through. So So swinging through, you see how it's all open as I'm coming through. Also, I don't need to worry about my entry. I used to have a problem entering really short. So I just come through and my thumb isn't actually pointing up. It's more, it's creating space in my shoulder. So it just comes through open. So it's like that. As well, when you're in a crowd and there's chop and it's open water, you're never gonna hit your hand on the water because you're not coming through like this. You're just gonna swing through. And for an open water situation, Max was talking about getting your rating up and that. You're in a crowd. If you're just going like this, nobody can mess your stroke up. You can also create space by widening your entry, and you can have a box, which is your box where you can breathe and swim. That's your area. And particularly for those of you that are in crowds, Slater's race report on Hawaii was great because he talked about just getting beaten for about an hour. And that's real common, but you got to just deal with it, create your box. So it's obviously for the smaller women, it's tougher to create your box, right? Because the guys are so massive. But for some of you guys with a bit of size, Harold, the pace you're going is going to be pretty crowded. You know, you're a strong guy. Create that box. So you're like you go a little bit wider and you create your space. So one of the things to watch, and I was talking with Nina. She's had some shoulder issues. She does a swing recovery, which is swing through with the thumb pointing down, and you'll actually, if you let your scapula come up and you don't have the scapular control that Jeff's talking about, it is an impingement position as you're coming through and lifting the shoulder as opposed to keeping the shoulder down and just swinging it. Other things you can do, if those of you that are in the gym, when you got your seated rows, let it go forward, pull it back. Have the ability to manipulate your scapula when it's under load. Lat pull downs all the way up, pull them down, then do the lat pull down. You got to use a little less weight, and those little muscles, just like Jeff said, small muscle, small loads. You got to take the load down and you'll feel them fatigue out, but just the ability to manipulate that scapula is quite important.
And that's it. Where you're getting your cuff in both of those exercises is that first one where you're basically, a little hard to explain, but it's where you're reducing the glenohumeral joint. It's where you're reducing your shoulder joint. And so that's what the cuff muscles do. They keep your glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint, reduced. And the reason we all have you have problems with your shoulder is because if it's not fully reduced when you activate the shoulder, every time it's sort of subluxing a little bit and grinding in an inappropriate position.
By reduced, you mean you keep it tight?
That's right. And so that initiation of that thing, in fact, if a lot of the kind of most up-to-date literature and physical therapy stuff will talk about what the whole idea is to do rotator cuff retraining, is to really concentrate on keeping your shoulder joint reduced before you initiate any activity. That's really where most of the research and so forth is going, is retraining. Instead of just relying on your great big muscles to really pull down in one thing, it's to isolate, reduce the glenohumeral joint, and then use the big muscle to activate or be able to use your big muscle. So.
Just a final point on that is also why if you're having shoulder issues, the swing recovery and entering down, not out, you just get to that power position as opposed to hanging it out in that impingement position. Max said not to reach, same kind of thing, because when you are long, you can handle it because you've got the ability and the range of motion. We've got pretty tight shoulders, so when we hang it out, you'll see, you probably won't see it in yourself, but certainly in your lane mates, you'll see they hang it out, that elbow's dropping, and then you're going to have to bring the elbow up before you get to your power position. So if you just enter down and go straight back. The other thing that you guys should watch for is have your forearms pointing at the bottom of the pool. Okay? Don't have them pointing sideways. Don't have your arm under your body. Forward, down, push water back. Keep it really simple.
Aim for the hip and close the gap through the finish, because you don't want to be finishing out. So right, almost brushing, I was talking with Ron, is right at the suit line. There's not a whole lot to gain from really extending out the bottom. You're better off getting it up, getting that speed out to get it back around. I was trying to get back to the front.
Thanks, Jeff. I've been wanting that clip for a long time.